Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Psychedelic. I'm Mike Brancatelli. Thanks for tuning in, thanks for listening, thanks for joining us here on this consciousness expanding conversational confluence of connectivity and something else with a C. So thank you for tuning in and listening and joining us on this conversation today. Today's guest is Leia Friedman. Leia Friedman is an amazing human being. She is a teacher, a writer. She's the co-founder of BEN, the Boston Entheogenic Network. She is the host of her own podcast, The Psychedologist, Consciousness Positive Radio. She is the Integration Resource List Volunteer Coordinator for MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and she is a permaculturist residing at Happy Acres Farm in Connecticut. What a wonderful name for a farm, and I hope you're all in a state of being in your own version of a happy acre environment for yourself that you're cultivating in your own life right now. And thank you for allowing me the pleasure of being inside of your ear holes and the privilege of me just letting these vibrational frequencies eject from the lowest hole in my face and worm their way out through the air into the, being absorbed by the black foam ball that sits around this metal object and transmitted through these wires so that you can understand what is going on inside of my meat computer, and I can technologically mediate some version of telepathy from my mind to yours as these words that are going into your ears and traveling through your brain and making your synapses fire on different levels to project some kind of symbolic imagery that then you can extract some possible meaning out of in this sort of form in which we're existing in right now, in this weird internet landscape. But I feel grateful, I feel privileged, I feel excited that we do live in this time right now, that we can use this wonderful, amazing technology to share and to connect and try and elevate ourselves up to a higher level to enact some kind of greater change for ourselves, for our relationships, for our friends, for our environment, for our community, for our world. And that's why I love this conversation with Leia. I just really did. I mean, we couldn't be more different people, but I think that we're just coming from different places. But I think there's there's differences and similarities, but it was a great mesh of those things, and I hope you'll see that in the show. And we talked about a lot of things. Like, her work focuses on consciousness through the lens of social and environmental justice, and bridging the gaps of the intersections that are out there of psychedelics and ecology, and she's just doing some really amazing work and really stuff that I'm psyched to be learning about and to share on the show and to be a part of. And so and our interaction, the way that we linked up, the way that we met, it was very interesting. And we tell that story at the end of the show. So stick around and listen to the end of the show, because I'm really happy at the way our first interaction, what happened with our first interaction and how that evolved and how this relationship has grown out of that. And I think it's just a great story to tell. It's a good example to share of maybe how, sometimes that we are confronted with situations or people in our lives that cause us maybe to go retreat to our little caves and get defensive, or be reactionary, or maybe we're not in a good place, and we're starting to project some things out onto other people and these sorts of things. So I'm happy that we were able to take a first interaction that could have potentially just been disastrous and turn it into something really wonderful and beautiful, and got the chance to have a conversation and share a lot of things that we both feel very passionately about. And that really is the goal. That's the goal there, is to try and find a way to accept the call that is being sent down, that is being transmitted from the higher states of consciousness that are available to us if we choose to participate in them. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do. And it's not about waving a magic wand and getting rid of any sort of like judgment or defensiveness or emotional aggressiveness or hostility, whatever comes along. This is part of being human. This is a fundamental part of being a whole and complete human being, is to experience a wide range of all of these sorts of emotions and feelings and experiences. And it's not necessarily about making them go away, but it's about cultivating a sense of awareness. It's about building up, of that muscle to constantly be in a state of checking yourself and checking your awareness, and not in this like obsessive way, but just to be aware, just to say, oh, okay, interesting. There's somebody here with a differing perspective than me. Maybe this is an opportunity for me to learn something. Maybe if I react in a way that is that is aggressive or hostile or mean, I'll shut down an opportunity to be exposed to a different way of looking at something, a different perspective, a different thing. And maybe, and just maybe, that different view, we could find similarities and we could find common ground. Maybe that's the way that we build this puzzle of a better reality, is to put aside any sort of, anything that is calling us to come down and throw, play in the dirt and throw mud, and instead answer the call to the higher self. And if you have the ability to do that, I think it's just a wonderful thing, because it opens you up, and you grow and you learn and you build. And we're all, in a sense, if we want to build a better world, if we want to build a better environment for us to exist in and to live in and to participate in, if we want to, vote for a better version of life, that we have to participate in it. We have to take our puzzle piece and see where we can fit it in the puzzle. Because everybody has a puzzle piece. Everybody has an opportunity to contribute to the larger picture of the puzzle that we're trying to build. And instead of just trying to jam your piece in somewhere or get upset at the game and just say, oh, this is stupid, or I don't want to play this game, or this is, it's about saying, okay, I accept this, I'm aware of this, and let me see where I can fit into this larger vision. And I think that everybody who listens to this show has some kind of idea of a larger vision that they want to achieve for themselves in their own lives, or how they would like to see things play out in the world. And really, it's about tapping into the energetic field in which we emit on a daily basis, that is also available to us like super highways that are flying by our faces. At every moment of the day, there's energy that's being put out there that's either calling us to participate in a lower vibrational frequency of energy, or that's calling us to participate in a higher vibrational frequency of energy. And if we can hop on that higher highway of energy, that we're really like inventing kind of like invisible, energetic, spiritual, cosmic tools to sort of work through this landscape, this environment, in order to use the right tools to communicate and to participate and to share and connect in a way that elevates. That elevates us. And the problem is, we don't live in a world that encourages this behavior. We live in a world that encourages divisiveness, polarization, team sides, shouting people down, being aggressive, hostile, violent, defensive, reactionary. This is the predominant mode of reality in which that is being thrust upon us to participate in, to conform in, the reality that we've been conditioned to exist in since birth, since being put into school and to going through the education system and everything into this. We've been conditioned to accept this version of what we call reality. But It's not the only version that's out there, and we don't have to participate in it. And it's very difficult to disengage from it. It's very easy to get sucked in. It's very easy to get sucked into your team, to your tribe, to your cause, to your beliefs, to what you believe is right. And the information on the internet, it's out there. It's out there. You can get into your little comfort bubble, and you can be there, and you can exist in your little reality tunnel and not let anybody else in, and not let any other perspectives or views in. And you can live that way if you'd like. But there is also another option. And really, the thing is that there are many options. There are many options. There's things that we don't even know that we don't know. To use the famous phrase from fucking Donald Rumsfeld, the unknown unknown, or the unknown knowns, or the known unknowns, whatever he said. But anyway, my point in saying all of this is to really just drive home the point that the greatest thing I think that the established power fears is people coming together to oppose them. And I think the only way that we change the world and make it a better place is if we understand that we do have a choice, that when we're in situations that challenge us, that we understand that we have a choice to either rise up to a higher level or to continue at the same level or even lower ourselves to a lower level. That we do have these choices, and that if we are interested in building a better world and improving our lives and improving the situation in which we exist in, that the only way that we achieve this is by coming together, by being the social creatures that we are, by being the social animals that we are, and by uniting and coming together to, oppose the things that we see out in the world that we don't like and that we don't want to participate in. And it comes with sacrifice. It comes with sacrifice of saying, no, I will not comply, no, I will not obey, no, I will not conform. It comes with sacrifices, but I believe that ultimately those sacrifices are worth it if we're trying to achieve a larger vision. And we can scale this down on an individual level. It's like, what to do, how, if you eat healthy, that it's good for you. That if you do certain things, that you're able to be more productive by asserting yourself and pushing forward to achieve something that you desire, that you have to take the necessary steps in order to enact that change. That we know that on an individual level, and it is challenging, and it's even more challenging on a collective level, on a larger level, on a societal and cultural level. But the whole reason why I do this show is to try and provoke thought, to try and get people thinking about, like, well, maybe there is something else, maybe there is another way to exist, maybe there is another way to think, maybe there is another way to participate, maybe there is another way to create a reality that I would like to be a part of. But anyway, that being said, I think the conversation is interesting and engaging and speaks for itself, and so let's get to that. But before we do, just want to give a quick shout out to some local Denver people. Thanks for messaging me, Daniela, Matt Crawford. Thanks. I hope you don't mind me dropping your name on the show, but had an awesome time hanging out with you, going to the show. Thanks for the cactus, and you're the man. So thank you to those people. Thanks to all the new people who are supporting me on Patreon. If you want to support the show on Patreon, you can donate as little as $1 a month. You can go there at patreon.com/Mike Brank. And you can donate as little as $1 a month, or $2 a month, or $3 a month, whatever it is that you want to do. Every little bit helps. Thank you to all the people that support the show by leaving reviews, 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. We have 137 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. And man, I love getting those reviews and looking at them and reading them. And thank you so much for all the people that reach out and ask questions and want to contact me and stuff. And thanks to all the people in the WhatsApp chat group, the Mycadelic Inner Sanctum. Thank you for all the interesting information that you share in there and the conversations. And thank you for all that. If you want to get a discount on plant-based and ketogenic nutrition products, go to bsynchro.com and enter the code Mycadelic at checkout for 20% off all their items there. And also check out Hemp Bombs. Go to hempbombs.com. Check out their CBD products. I love the gummies. I think they're great. And you get 15% off there by entering the code Mike15. All right, that's it. Leia Friedman is the guest today. We had a great conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Thanks. Take care.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
I had such a great time at the Ben event that I saw you at in Boston. So I was living there for 5 weeks, just temporarily. My girlfriend used to live there, and then she went traveling around the world. We met at an ayahuasca center, and we decided to say, hey, where are we going to live? We picked Denver, but she wanted to be in Boston, so it was nice. It was an enjoyable experience, and I really had a great time. I don't often get out to events like that, and I really liked it. It was so much fun. There were so many interesting people there, and I know that you're like the co-founder of Ben, right?
Yes, Ben was not always Ben. It first was the Boston area radical consciousness and psychedelic meetup group, and that was my current
What's the acronym for that?
Who started it? Yeah, Barkirk. Barkirk. Yeah, and we did Ben because we wanted something acronymable. But yeah, Matty Peru, he started that when he got home from Dreamglade and was in Boston and felt the need to and the call to find the others and support the others finding each other. So he started it up, and then while he was, getting things rolling, he felt the call to travel again, and so he left. And nothing was going on with the group. My colleague Nathaniel Putnam asked me if I'd like to help start something. So we linked up, created Ben, and another person, Nikki Stearns, came on. And then within a year or less, Matt came back from traveling. We met at the first, it was sort of like a conference event we had at Ben. It was called A Trip to the Past, Boston's Psychedelic History. Because wealth of psychedelic history in Boston, actually.
Yeah,
Are you aware of that?
Oh, big time. Yeah, I mean, that's, as far as I know, where pretty much everything that got started there with Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary at Harvard. Is there something further back or is it?
Well, there's always something further back. I mean, I'm still trying to learn if there's a plant indigenous to this area that's hallucinogenic, right? Because that would like the actual far back stuff. But no, pretty much starting there with the Good Friday experiments. I mean, the
right.
Western industrialized mainstream psychedelic movement had a lot of roots in Boston.
Yeah. I'm sure that there were maybe some native people in the lands beforehand experimenting with some sort of altered states of consciousness that we're maybe not aware of right now. But yeah, as far as the modern birth of the psychedelic movement, yes, I remember reading about that, and I remember because it was after a very profound LSD experience I had, and you grow up learning about this in the mainstream way where it's this drug and it's bad and it's going to put holes in your brain, it stays in your spine, I don't know, whatever these messages that we get, these fear-based messages. I remember seeing this and thinking, oh my God, wait a second, I'm not crazy. There was something happening here at Harvard with some people, and it's pretty interesting, and I followed that path along, and it was a very eye-opening and rewarding path to follow.
Yes, absolutely. Well, John Lattin was a great writer, and he wrote a book called The Harvard Psychedelic Club. It's kind of the boys' tale of all those early shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of like the formation of like I just watched this movie about National Lampoon magazine. It's like kind of a similar type of thing, but in a different genre, if you will. Yeah.
Great connection there. Absolutely. Yeah. So at Trip to the Past, we coordinated a couple of people to come and speak, and the first night was a storytelling night. So I told a story about my first LSD trip, and Matt was really captivated by my story. And we met soon after that, and we got together.
Share that story here, or is it only for live events? Is this what got you started in the psychedelic field?
What got me started was dating a coworker who was into psychedelics, into high doses of mushrooms, high doses of anything, actually. But he was working with mushrooms, and I was really judgmental of him. I thought I thought all the things, the holes in your brain. And when he and I broke up, actually, is when I started exploring psychedelics, because I missed him, and he brought a lot into my life. And I was trying to see about embodying the things I'd begun to learn. He taught me about Vipassana, and he had moved to India to do a reforestation thing. So that was like the beginning of, the real beginning of my consciousness journey was someone giving me a copy of Tricycle magazine. Have you ever heard of that? Buddhist magazine?
No, I haven't.
I went to public school. I had never, so I will tell the first LSD story, but first let me give you this.
Yeah.
I went to public school in Massachusetts, and I learned so very little about Indigenous people on this continent, so very little about other religions. I didn't learn about any religions, actually. I had friends that went to Catholic school. I think I learned some things from them. But yeah, my education was really, I don't even know what it was focused on. Like, what was I guess maybe focused on science and technology, but there's just a huge gap in like the humanities aspect of that.
Yeah.
And so when I read this first article about non-duality, it was hard to swallow. It was really intense. And I happened to be traveling to Peru at the time. This neighbor, he knew I was going to Machu Picchu, and
How old
said,
were you?
I was 23, maybe 22 or 23.
All right, cool.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't care much for drinking. I'd smoked pot. I never thought too much of it. Although I had a folder in my phone called Ideas. I was like, these ideas I got when I was
awesome.
high. Mm-hmm. But yeah, apart from that, I didn't recognize the benefit in altered consciousness experiences. And when I was hiking up Huayna Picchu, which is like one of the peaks that's over Machu Picchu at 5 a.m. or something, I kept having these weird lightness, these feelings of lightness and dissolution of my body. And I sat on top of the peak and had a spiritual experience that I don't even remember. I don't know how to describe it, but I know that I was writing in my journal. I don't know what's happening, but it felt really good, really familiar, like home. And after that, I dated that man who was into psychedelics, and then in an attempt to impress him, I got connected with an ayahuasca center and decided that I would go drink ayahuasca.
Okay. In Peru?
No, in Costa Rica.
In Costa Rica. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it was another coincidence. I was just going to Costa Rica. After we broke up, I wanted to travel, and
beautiful
I had
place,
also gotten
both
fired
Peru
from a job.
And Costa Rica, very beautiful.
Oh yeah, huge places for me too. Yes, they are. So yeah, in this LSD trip, I didn't create intention, but thankfully I cleaned up my space, and sort of like there was some ritual to it in that way. But I took it, and then my grandmother, who I used to live in her basement, she yelled downstairs, "Can you bring something down to your auntie's house?" And I'm like looking at the time. Oh, it's been a half hour. Okay, I think I can make it. So I grabbed this like pot full of something and brought it down the street to my auntie and ran back. And then the visuals were starting to come in. I'm like, fuck. Okay, so I laid down. And I'm like, I need music. Oh yeah, people listen to music when they do this. Okay, I get that. And I wanted to listen to sensual drums. So I had my sensual drums. So I actually on the ayahuasca music that the center had said, make sure you listen to this before you come because we want you to be able to sing along. It's kind of like a daime, pseudo daime place.
Right.
And I put that on. And in that trip, I I had a lot of incredible visuals. It was really great, LSD. And one of the things I saw were my plants, which I sorely neglected plants, growing new tendrils and like dancing and then withering and dying. And then growing new tendrils and then withering and dying. And I was just like, completely amazed watching this cycle of life and death in front of me. And I realized, so I have had issues with eating disorder my whole life, different eating disorders and body dysmorphia. And I realized that some of my alienation from my body and from food was related to being disconnected from the cycles of nature. That I produce waste and it doesn't become anything, it stays waste, it rots. That I take and use, but I don't give back at all. So that sort of thought was present with me. And for the next days, I was really depressed because no one in my life used drugs, really. And I didn't feel there was anyone I could talk to about it. There was one person, I was talking to him, but I didn't know how to look for help. And then I got my period. I started to bleed a few days later. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I was so emotional because I was PMSing. And I didn't think any deeper into it than that at that time either. I now recognize that being sensitive before I bleed is a time of deeper intuition and no bullshit. And
right.
It's a visionary time for sure. So the real psychedelic experience came when I removed my Diva cup. It's like a cup that catches the menstrual blood inside.
I'm familiar.
Oh, sweet. Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Highly recommend. And I looked at it, and usually I wouldn't look at it. I would just, dump it in the toilet and just like go on with my day, clean it, pop it back in. But I actually looked at the blood, and because after you take LSD for the first time, you look at everything differently. And it was swirling and kind of oily and had these different rich colors. And I thought I was looking at the universe in a way.
Wow.
So that was the story that I told, and the beginning of my journey in so many ways, because I work with the land now. I've taken a permaculture course, Starhawk's Earth Activist Training. Starhawk is an activist and a permaculture teacher and a witch and a writer, popular writer.
Yeah.
And I'm working in a way related to I don't call it the sacred feminine to myself, but I'm trying to think of how to call it to your listeners. Just, it doesn't not include men or non-binary folks. It's not focused on women, but it is this, I think it's like the truth that those who've been oppressed for their gender and sex know, a truth related to that oppression. And I'm still finding out really what all of it is that I'm doing here, but those were some of my roots.
Awesome. Yeah. And roots not just coming like from you, but connected to the earth and like the cosmos and this whole, it's not an accident that like what had happened to you when you had taken the psychedelic is what happened to you. It's like this meaning is trying to communicate something really deep and profound. And if you're interpreting it in this way, it's like, it's cool. It's like a puzzle trying to figure out, right? Like where you're going to build from. And yeah, that's awesome. What a story.
Yeah, exactly. The linear look of like, was I seeing the future, or was that the past coming true, or was it me getting an idea that I've now followed? It's like if you stop looking at time as being linear and sort of two-dimensional, then or whatever. What dimension is time anyway? Is that the fourth dimension?
I'm not sure. I know where you're going. I'm not sure if time has a labeled dimension. Does it? I'm not smart enough to know. So.
No, not that kind of smart.
Yeah.
But yeah. So all the great becoming. Yeah, that was part of the beginning.
And you were in college at this time?
No, I'd finished college.
I
had my
college.
master's.
You had your master's. Yeah. Okay. And
clinical psychology.
In clinical psychology, right. And then you had this experience, and then what sort of came after that? Was there? I know you talked about like founding Ben, but that was later, right?
Yeah, that was a few years later. The next thing that happened was I went to Costa Rica for 3 months. I did work trade at a hostel in Uvita called Cascada Verde that's still there. I drank ayahuasca and had more profound realizations and continued my work. I came home at the end of March to Massachusetts and was like becoming, I was becoming, and I felt like a different person. But then back in the winter, back in the same environment, I started to feel myself withering. And I got this insight one day that in Costa Rica, all of these seeds germinated. It's such an abundant place. It's like the jungle.
Yeah.
And I realized I have to water these plants that were propagating. So I was just perusing Facebook for something to do, and I found Symposia's conference at UMass Amherst back a bunch of years ago. Envisioning a Future Post-Prohibition was the name of it. And
nice.
Yeah, it was an awesome conference. Like, I haven't been to one like that since it. It had all different voices. That was my introduction to a lot of my female now friends and superheroes, though. Catherine McLean, Nishay Deveneaux, Britta Love. I saw them all speak there. And Kalindi Igi was there. The Beantown Ghetto Shaman, Abdul Wilkins. He's a really amazing guy. Yeah.
Awesome. Nice. Yeah, it's amazing. I've been to Costa Rica as well. I had a great time there, and Peru too. And it's like, oftentimes when you go to these places, it can help inform you to bring something back as well. Not just the experiences that we have, but I think also just like the culture. And one of the things I liked about Costa Rica was like reading that they don't have a military. They don't have a standing military. They really invest in their public schools, and the people there seem very at ease with life. At least in the parts where I was, it seemed to be that way. And yeah, travel has been a good chunk of like my discovery as well. Traveling to other places, other cultures, seeing how other people live, really seeing how other people live, and then also having psychedelic experiences as well. And then when you put those two things together and come back into the world, you're back into sort of like your native creation continuum now. Like, it's like, okay, cool. Like, bring what you've learned and like, let's see if you can integrate this into this like toxic society that we live in.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I think that I used to go away and think I was seeing other cultures because I was at places for tourists, for white people, that were staffed by folks who lived there, and they seemed nice. They were very courteous. And so I'm like, oh, I've seen another culture. They talk differently. That's seeing another culture. It's not really immersion.
Right.
You have to make an effort, and you have to be willing to give and give up to really know another culture.
Yeah. So do you think that's played a significant role in your journey?
Yes, absolutely. I had been to a few places and had true immersion into other cultures. Like a cousin of mine wanted to visit her best friend in Africa who was living in, Namacha, this village right below or right above the border with Swaziland in Mozambique.
Okay.
So I went to Mozambique when I
wow.
was like 20, and that was really, really intense. Like, where they lived, they would pay their neighbor. She would go get them a couple gallons of water and carry it on her head up like a mile-long hill, and like every day. And
they really love carrying with the heads there. They like that all over the world. They do that. I think it's actually good if you have the neck for it.
Yeah, right. And if you've been carrying stuff, then you do have the neck for it. It's a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's less fatigue. But yeah, so I'd seen and experienced some things, and yeah, travel continues to be a part of my journey. I'm actually spending my first winter in New England since I began the psychedelic journey 5 years ago. I'm living here on the farm all winter now, and it's been a trip here through the ice and the snow and bringing hay to the cows when it's freezing rain and we're slipping and falling on our asses. So.
Yeah, tell me about the farm. That sounds really interesting. When did you move there?
I moved here in April. This past winter, I did a lot of travel. My father was living in Brazil, so I went and visited him in Brazil, and then I went to Guatemala and took a course at Fungi Academy. Atitlan. And I have a podcast episode about that.
The Psychedologist.
Really, yep, The Psychedologist, the Consciousness Positive Radio. And after Guatemala, I went to Costa Rica for a little while. I gave a talk at Envision about, it was called Permaculture, Sex, and Psychedelics, Oh My. And it was at the intersections of permaculture principles with conscious sexuality and conscious psychedelic use. Those are kind of two of my bends, are sex and psychedelics and consciousness. And then I came home briefly, and then I went on Cosmic Sisters trip to the Temple of the Way of Light, which I think maybe we could talk about a little as well.
Yeah.
It was after that I moved to the farm, so in April.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, the Temple of the Way of Light. Yeah, I spent 3 months volunteering there. And yeah, I think you had Zoe, is it right, on your show, Zoe Helene? And she leads the Cosmic Sister, right?
Yes, Zoe Helena.
Helena,
and
yes.
I met her actually at Symposia conference too. I should have mentioned that. She and Chris were there. Yeah, she brings a group of women down who receive different ways of support from her organization, and she brings them to a different, centers with integrity, and she makes sure that everyone's safe, like really, really makes sure. And I was there with a huge group, like 23 of us or something.
Yeah, I must have been there at the same time. I remember Chris Killam giving a talk about different
Were you
kinds
there?
of. I was there. Yeah, I was at the talk. And then I had Chris on the show. We sat in. I don't know if you remember Debbie, who was probably one of the lead facilitators.
Kidding?
Yeah,
Debs?
How great is she?
The greatest. Yeah. I listened to that episode with Chris. It was really something. Again, made me cry.
Yeah,
it was Chris talking about crying. It was something that made him happy.
Yeah. When Debbie she came in to ask some questions, it was really cool. It was the first time that I did that with my show, where I sort of had another host come in and do something. It was nice. It was a cool experience. Yeah. I was at Chris's talk, sitting in the back, just tasting everything that was getting passed around. Maybe a little bit more than we were supposed to take.
Yeah, that was a cool talk.
Yeah,
he's a cool guy.
So yeah, you're living on the farm. What's farm life like? How do you like it? I mean, it sounds very appealing to me. I keep telling my girlfriend I want to live in the woods and make my own honey, and like do something in nature, like away from city life. But we're not there yet. So it sounds very appealing to me to be living on a farm, taking care of animals. And can you explain kind of like what's that like? How is that, and what do you do there?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Well, this farm is called Happy Acres Farm. It is a grass-fed beef farm, and the land, all the land surrounding here used to be farmland, and then slowly the man who owned it, Anthony or Tony Hapanovich, was selling off parcels so he could keep farming. It wasn't making enough money to support it all. But when he died, there were 90 acres left, and he left it to the town. And so they were seeking some people to steward the farm and keep it running as an active farm. It has picturesque red barns. Actually, I can kind of turn you around and show you what I'm looking at outside.
Oh, cool. Ah, there it is. The red barns. You guys can't see it, but it's there.
But you can see it because you know what I mean with the red barns.
Yes, exactly. Imagine that in your mind. I think they have the imagination to picture a red barn. Yes.
Yep. So John and Catherine McLean and her husband John Motzinger were some of the applicants to steward the farm, along with a business partner of theirs that they no longer work with, who's no longer here. But they won the vote for, you guys take over the farm. And their plan was to transform the land from a monocrop of corn, which was feed for the cows. And the cows were housed in the barn in these like neck locks that kind of hold them in one place, which is pretty standard. It's a standard way to keep animals safe when when you have them in captivity and you need them to do this specific thing for you. So it's like humane in a way, because if they were just wandering around in the barn, they would slip and fall and hurt each other. So they were kept in these locks, but it's really not, it's not a good life at all.
Right.
So they released the cows to the fields. They took down all the corn and seeded grass and clover and other alfalfa and other nutritious bovine food. And we have lots of deer that graze here too.
A bovine buffet.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Moo. I'm trying to think of a pun with moo, but I can't. So, yeah, we have a herd of cows and we do educational events. We have goats and we have some chickens. And so people, they learn about farming, and we sell our beef at a local farmer's market. The animals are completely free of antibiotics and things like that. They drink fresh water from a well, and they basically move to a new parcel of grass every day. So they're getting fresh grass. And then in the winter, we feed them hay, which was created, was mowed and in the summer. So hay from around here also.
Yeah.
And there's a garden also, which was what I came on to take care of, was the CSA for the community supported or community shared agriculture is what CSA stands for. And I was just reading in this amazing book, Farming While Black, this morning. I'm going to see if I can look up it was this African American man who created the concept of CSA. And I have to put it in the show notes. I should remember. But yeah, just like how many contributions people of color made to farming is insane. When we think of farming as being like a white, more hipster thing to do these days, some people may think of it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or sort of the classical, traditional, just kind of like old conservative man with a cowboy hat on the, tending to me horses out here in this fine splendor,
Yes, exactly.
But farming is for everybody, right? I mean, it's like, this is a beautiful thing, I think, that, and especially if you're someone who's more like psychedelically inclined, to be really in the circle of life, in a hands-on way, and not creating this sort of fake false separation between where your food comes from and what you're participating in, and the whole cycle of that. The average person goes to the grocery store, picks up their stuff, there's a smiling cow on the package of beef or whatever, most likely it's in some cage somewhere, getting fed corn or something, some steroid infused stuff, and you don't think twice about them, and so it's just, I really admire that sort of, that lifestyle. There was a time, I think, when all of us were doing these sorts of things, just really having a hands-on natural connection with the land. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it is very psychedelic in so many ways. One being that connection that a person might feel to their ancestors and to their lineage in the psychedelic experience. All of our ancestors were farming, foraging, hunting in some way, shape, or form. And it's we actually absorb nutrients through our skin. So when you're digging in the soil, you're like acquiring the fertility of the earth, not just through the food that you're eating, but also through in that means. And yeah, being down, being close, all the smells that come through the nose, the way the senses are sharpened to just be able to find weeds better. Like it made me a better human in so many ways, a more attuned being.
Yeah, it's so natural for us to behave in that way and to live that sort of lifestyle in this, with reciprocity to the environment and the thing that we're a part of. So yeah, one day I'm going to make it out to greener pastures. As of now, I've moved to Denver, so I'm out of New York City. I used to live in New York City for a long time. I couldn't live there anymore. After my first actual ayahuasca experience in Peru, I came back and I was like, wow, this is intense. I really felt like I was like in this matrix that was like pulling me in. I know it's not like that for everybody, but some people can jive in that environment. But for me, like, I was really picking up on like the collective energetic frequency of this, what I think is like a sociopathic cesspool of a city, like that runs on like narcissism and materialism. But again, that's how I interpreted it. So I needed to move. I'm living in Denver now. I'm loving it. The mountains here, the sun shines out. Very good for staving off the depression as well. Just being out in the sun, which is really nice. So
definitely, I would add that New York is run on stimulants, so narcissism, industrialization and stimulants.
Yeah.
That's what I feel there.
There's good to be found in there. There's good going on. There's good people doing good things. But yeah, that's how I perceive it. Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, we are an hour and 45 minutes north of New York City, and I go down from time to time. It's good to visit. And you asked what farm life is like, and I wanted to explain that it is a farm that I live on, but I have a car. I commute a half hour to this city where I teach at a community college. Like we still get plenty of our things from the grocery store. It's like there are farming is a continuum for sure. And I think it's good to get our hands in the dirt as much as we can, but like I am frightened at how dependent I still am on the system, even while living here, and eating from the garden, etc. It's quite a divorce.
Yeah, dependent upon the system, right? I mean, it's this thing that we really don't want to be dependent upon, but it's so omnipresent that it forces us to. It's a thing I wrestle with constantly, But yeah, I think that what we could do is just make strides in the right direction, right? Just put one foot in front of the other and just try and have a little impact that you can. I mean, like, for example, with what you did by creating Ben, like bringing people together. I hear that story so many times. It's like, find the others, right? Like that's what this is about, is just trying to really mesh with other people that see the world in the way that you see it to try and make it better. And then if you can get with those people, there's this sort of, you create a different energetic frequency, right? That comes out, and it's like, cool. This is like, we're building this sort of new vision that we have that it actually might be an old vision, but reemerging, right?
Yes. And I'm reminded of Annie Oak at Horizons this year. She gave a talk on risk reduction at psychedelic events. And she said, psychedelic communities are no different than the cultures that they are a part of. Meaning that in our psychedelic groups, we still are going to be bringing in our baggage of colonialism and racism and sexism, et cetera. And so I think one of the very cool things I've seen Ben doing is trying to be more conscientious of those aspects. And, there are all these spectrums of psychedelic entrepreneurs and people who are doing it with true integrity. I asked myself today, like, why really do I do the podcast? Is there something that I see for myself in it? And when I started it, I think definitely I wanted my voice to be out there for some reason, because that can lead to openings for other opportunities. I like opportunities. Now I don't think of it as, which makes it hard to continue it sometimes, is I don't think of it as something for myself. And it's more so for the voices of people that I'm representing on my show, or I'm not representing their voices, the voices of people that my show is a brief platform for when they grace me with their presence. But it's scary. It's scary times with the power of these compounds and how analyzed and interpreted it can be by our human, our still ego-driven selves.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points there. I think that, like, as soon as I started to discover this sort of psychedelic community that was formed, this like psychedelic world, I initially thought like, oh, well, great. Well, everybody who's into psychedelics must also be into like spirituality and like dropping their egos or whatever. And everyone's probably just holding hands and singing Kumbaya and waving around and like, we're going to create the better world. And you realize that people are people and they bring their stuff into wherever they are and they have their things, and myself included, you know what I mean? I used to be an asshole. Like, it's like I still consider myself, a dumb asshole because I have to, otherwise my ego will be like, no, you're great. Like, it's just, it's a careful thing that I have to always be aware of and conscious of, and I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had. And I think that for me, a part of my responsibility with talking into this microphone is that I can maybe shed light on what it was like to be this sort of like unconscious, egoic, sort of typical macho dickhead person who's then made this journey and still journeying to this better place that I see, this higher vision that's calling me forward. And it's not easy, all that stuff comes along with it. But yeah, and like what you said, I mean, I'm wondering, for your show and what you're doing, and it's like you mentioned, I don't know why or whatever, and it was like, do you feel that maybe sometimes that you're like, I know this might sound a little pretentious to say, but like, I'm just going to say it anyway, like a conduit for something bigger, like maybe that you don't know particularly why, but you feel driven to certain aspects of things, and it's sort of a force that comes from you. I'm wondering if you feel that at all.
I don't think that that's pretentious at all. I think it's the opposite.
Okay, good.
Because if you're a conduit for something greater, then you're just being a channel, and it's not coming from you, it's coming through you. So I haven't thought about that before. And just from this movie I just watched today about the massacre of 2 million communists, mostly Chinese, in Indonesia in 1965. And then they went back to this like film crew had this idea, like, let's go talk to the killers, the gangsters, and say, do you want to make a movie about what you did? Like, that would be so cool. Because these guys are still like, oh, thank God we killed all those people.
Right.
They brag about it.
The Act of Killing, right? That was the name of it?
That was the name of the movie. Yeah. Werner Herzog was the executive director of it. He makes some really intense shit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so just they felt that they had a mission to do that, and it had to come through them. Their actions came through them. So I can't own the good stuff that comes through me and not the bad. But I believe that we are all we have consciousness of our bodies and our minds so that we can, feed them and create connections with others. But that's all this bigger thing doing something. Just like my cells in my gut, they are sentient. They know, they things and sometimes they control me. They tell me to eat sugar and
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing to think about. I mean, really, really is. You bring up like the cells and the body. The body just works, right? I mean, it's constantly collaborating with each other. There's hardly any like dissent happening within the normal like circulatory nervous system, arguing, protest, whatever it is. It's just like the body just goes, okay, you're the heart, you do the heart thing. I'm the liver, I'll do the liver thing, and we'll send the information back and forth in a dialogue, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dis-ease are those systems being in, some sort of conflict, whether it originates in one system and then that affects the other systems, and then finding the root seems kind of like what we're doing as people. Like, what is the root of cruelty and all of that? I think it does stem from over individualism. Because, well, I think communism was so scary to these guys because they felt that they would be giving up their safety and their freedom and their individuality, their originality. I can't speak for what they were afraid of, but there's a lot of toxic, patriarchal kind of stuff going on, imperialist stuff. Indonesia was colonized. And okay, this is going to be a tangent diverging from what I intended to say, but I bet it'll just come back. Podcast magic.
It's all fun, yeah.
So I've been taking an herbalism course while I'm living here, and there's an amazing school, Twin Star School of Herbal and Energetic Studies in New Milford, Connecticut. And I'm learning about how the compounds in these herbs don't actually have any benefit to the plant itself, like DMT and chacruna or the MAOI in the ayahuasca vine. They don't support the reproduction or the survival of the plant. They're actually, well, maybe they support the reproduction because humans recognize the medicinal value in these plants and then propagated them. And it could be that, like, that's like the Michael Pollan idea.
Right.
So thinking about the systems in the body too, of being in conflict, and then that an herb can bring that system into balance by changing one thing, especially the adaptogens, which don't just increase or decrease something, which is how I always thought of anything must increase or decrease things, because that's how Western medicine works.
Right.
But actually, they'll help bring something into balance by changing all these things. And then on top of that, they have so many active constituents, these plants, fungi, etc., that when you isolate one, we're like, oh, THC does this.
Mm-hmm.
we just want THC. We don't want the other stuff. Well, actually, the other stuff is helping to moderate and mediate what the THC does. For instance, talking about cannabis.
Yes.
Yeah. So the system of my gut within the system of me that I call myself, this like consciousness of me being separate, and then but I'm totally reliant on my environment. Yeah. And who knows what's reliant on human beings existing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it really is just this, this fear-based, conditioning that comes from like this sort of power elite centers that, have an interest in trying to mold and shape people to exist in that sort of realm, to be in conflict, in this way they can go ahead and, as George Carlin famously says, like, and they run away with all the money, and the power and stuff. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing to take a look at, for sure. And I think a lot of like what I'm hopeful for now is seeing people sort of taking further steps into like unraveling more of the sort of conditioning to get really to the core of what really matters. And that's why I'm such a fan of psychedelics and plant medicines and things like that. So yeah, lost my train of thought, really. But
choo choo.
That's what happens. We can take tangents, we can lose trains of thought, but that's fine. Maybe it's time for a segue. And I think that a segue always works best when you don't announce that there's a segue coming. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to do here because, this could be a thing too. This could be another modality of podcasting. It doesn't have to be smooth and sleek. I want to know, so what are you currently doing right now? What's currently taking up your interest and what you're working on and what you're caring about at this moment?
Well, I related to what you said about being a former douche and a current douche. And,
really? I don't see
well,
that.
kind of. Let's go there. Well, I remember being, I remember being very obsessed with status, money, my appearance, success, material success, wealth. And I remember it so well because it was, I was a fully formed adult and like had been through so many years of school that I am having a hard time backing away from helping people that are kind of still in that world and they don't want to be anymore. So, I mean, no offense to anyone who emails me. I don't mean to put you in a box, but I'm getting a lot of people writing to me saying, I am dissatisfied with my life. I, plug in the things that they do here that just don't make them feel fulfilled. And they hear about psychedelics and that maybe that's the key. So one thing I've been doing is coaching or consultation for folks who haven't really tried drugs before and who want to do it safely and don't even know what they're seeking, but they feel that they are seeking something important. So I've been helping people. They contact me wanting me to be their psychedelic therapist. And I say, I don't facilitate or condone illegal activity, but in the spirit of risk reduction, and in the spirit of risk reduction, harm reduction, I will, if you plan to do that, I will help you prepare safely and I will help you integrate afterward. So that's one thing that I enjoy. And yet my number one priority this year, and I'm just going to keep saying it until I actually am representing it with my actions, is to be in a closer and deeper, more deep relationship with myself. I'm paying attention to the cycle of the moon and how I feel during the different phases. I'm paying attention to where I'm at in my menstrual cycle. I'm trying to eat conscientiously. And my partner, Matt, who helped start Boston Entheogenic Network, or the other one, he moved to the farm and we prepare a lot of meals together. And I'm like in such a more embodied way, eating and consuming energy. That's what food is. So shifting my relationship to food. I had the most powerful MDMA experience I've ever had recently, where going into it, I noticed now that I'm meditating more and I'm getting into relationship with my body, I have more control over my actions. And I was starting to use that control to withhold food and to like starve myself. I wasn't starving myself, but I knew I wasn't consuming enough calories. And for a few days, it was kind of awkward. Like Matt noticed I wasn't really eating. I felt myself being hungry and not eating. So I talked to my therapist and decided to bring it to the MDMA space. And before I took it, Matt and I were kind of preparing, talking to each other, and it came up like, what about not trying to love my body? Because that's always been the thing, like just learn to love my body. Like, no, what about just loving myself? This body is, it's changing all the time. It's gonna decompose. And in the trip, I definitely connected with that so much. I don't have any words for it because I'm still processing it, but that's what I'm working on primarily, is my relationship with myself. And then, I do want to support these growing stages that the mainstream psychedelic community is in. Someone said it very well. My friend Nav, who, you ever see those people that just started drinking ayahuasca like this year, but it's just like boom, and they get it and they're crazy about it.
Yeah.
So. Love you, Nav. So he was saying how he feels some of us are here to midwife the birth of a new era. And it's, birth is a messy, scary, dangerous process. So
right. Yes.
myself facilitating that emergence too.
It's amazing. Yeah. And this goes back to what you were talking about before with your LSD trip, like seeing the plants and the circle of life and the blood and the universe and all this stuff. And it's like, I think a lot of times I see some, psychedelic minded people that are like really attaching to sort of the higher realms and the beauty of things and sort of leaving maybe the body behind. It's just this thing that holds my meat computer in my skull and, just walks me around like Krang from Ninja Turtles. And it's like, there and leaving sort of like the nasty bits and like but like you said with birth, it's creative destruction happening all in one, and it's building and rebuilding continuously, and really getting in touch with that is a super important thing, and doing that on an individual level for yourself no doubt will have an effect on the larger collective that you interact with, and I guess that's the best that we can do, right? Is like do that and then, pursue our passions. And you have your podcast as well. And you're also helping people who, and this model of harm reduction is just a fantastic model because it's like, it basically accepts people for who they are and what they're going to do. And it doesn't try and tell people what they can and cannot do and what they should do and what we want them to do, but says, listen, you're free to make your own decisions. We're here to help if you want to reach out for that help. And that's a beautiful model. Yeah.
Yes, much agreed. I take that perspective when I teach my classes. I've been teaching as an adjunct, teaching psychology for about 6 years now, maybe more. And I'm teaching sociology for the first time this semester, which I'm excited to do. Yeah, because I believe that my psychedelic journeys have made me more sociologically minded. But I just like had studied psych. And I tell my students so much more than what the book says. And I actually don't tell them much of what the book says. I do like,
so you're a good
make
teacher.
Sure that they're,
yeah.
Wow, I try to be.
Yeah.
I try to make sure that those who have no interest in my interests are still getting like the quality experience from it, and they can be successful in their future psych courses. But yeah, I talk like we were learning about chapter 4. Chapter 4 is always consciousness, and so we're learning about drugs and the 4 main classes of drugs: stimulants, depressants, opiates, and psychedelics, and that's the way it's categorized. And tobacco is a stimulant. So here are my students. They already know about tobacco from, let's see, probably commercials, seeing people use it, using it themselves.
Yeah.
And and like warning signs, and lung cancer, et cetera. And this is their relationship with tobacco is usually those things. And then the textbook tells them about the nicotine receptors in the brain and cancer carcinogens. And so I like got up on a really big soapbox for a second, and I'm like, do you have any idea how sacred this plant is? And like, if everyone wasn't looking at me, like they definitely started to at that point. And I talked about what a heroic and selfless plant this is. that is here to save your ass. Like, if you will open up and let it, like, this plant is here to help you, and this plant will help you receive help from other plants. And I talked about how there's colonialism in all of our textbooks, and this is just another example that this is a sacred plant for a lot of people. Yeah, it was cool. And there are a number of my students who are from Central America, and I think that they were aware of what I was speaking to from, like, maybe grandparents or something. And that was cool. I want to do that more, within the realms of what's safe, because if you speak out too much, then I can't have access to these young mainstream minds anymore. And I feel that there's still something important to do there.
Yeah, definitely. No, well played. Well played. I think that's, I have a tendency to just get on this show and just be sort of, just going, like, just being like lecturing and talking about, like, this is a sacred plant. I'll get worked up about it, but I can't be fired. I'm not a professor. So it's like, I have the luxury of not being a professor, but also not the credibility. So, but I enjoy, speaking about these things, because I'm certain of them based upon my direct experience. I've experienced tobacco in very sacred ways, and I've experienced the healing, and just the amazing. Yeah, it is a master plant. It is revered by the indigenous people that I was a part of in Peru, and used in a very, very sacred way, in a ceremonial healing way. It's a teacher. It's a teacher as well. And and we leave all this stuff out. I wonder why we want, the mainstream establishment wants to leave all this kind of stuff out. That's where I tend to focus my interest, is looking at these structures and these systems and what they disseminate, and how people interact with them, and also what we accept and what we allow, and it can be kind of tough, and you can feel like a victim sometimes if you're, waking up to the oppression that is being thrust upon you. It can be very difficult. But yeah, it's great to have people out there like you who are, like, inserting this education properly. So, good stuff.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Leah in the front row. Yes.
When you say you can feel like a victim when you wake up to seeing this oppression, do you feel that way? Have you felt that way?
Yes. Yeah, I have. And I feel that there has to be a level of victimhood inherent in sort of the societal structures in which we are forced to participate in. And so whenever I see that there's a level of force and coercion and, intricate manipulation and propaganda, I do consider that a form of, like, aggression on sovereign individuals who don't necessarily have a chance to explore who they are, why they are, and these sorts of things. So I think there is a sort of a level of victimhood that's being thrust down upon us by what we call the leaders of, the people who, if you look at the people who make the most money and have the most things and the most land and these sorts of things, this elite group of people, that is in, I think, inherent in the systems that we participate in, that we don't necessarily have, like, a choice to. So, but I think that also that once you realize that you can overcome that to a certain degree. I think, you can do something to try and make an effort to right the wrong. In a way, I feel like I'm reading a lot of books about mythology right now, and they talk about wise old elders of the tribe who usher in the new generation, and particularly men who don't, in this age that we're living in right now, we don't necessarily see a sort of culturally top-down approach to help men initiate into the culture properly, from being young boys into being, like, actual stewards of the society and embodiments of the values that the society cherishes for the greater good of people. So what we see is we just see boys just being just not having that education or that initiation, and then they just, fuck things up forever. And, that seems to be a major part of the problem, I think. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, they do not deserve that. That would not be their choice, I think. If most people were offered options for what they'd be exposed to and then what that would lead to them believing and doing, how many people would choose to be swathed in this toxic masculinity culture, this rape culture? And I'll add that, you said like boys don't have rites of passage, but, no one really does in industrialized society.
Right.
And it can be done. And the rites of passage that exist, right, mostly related to drinking, sex, unconscious sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that this is the crux of this seems to be a theme in social justice type conversations, is privilege, and like, does being called out or called in or just shown that you have privilege, reminded that you have privilege, have to put someone on the defensive? It shouldn't, because, if it was a choice, then everyone would have privilege and it wouldn't be a thing. It's not a choice. It's something that you're born into, and or that you can acquire it during your life, like class privilege. So that sensitivity to being reminded of your privilege, I think, stops the potential for compassion to come in. And it can start with compassion for the self, that like, I've perpetrated these violent acts and I don't see myself as a bad person, but yet I have perpetuated all kinds of oppression, and it's not that like I can't be a bad person, therefore I can't have done anything bad. Like, there's these sort of like logical fallacies that some of our minds operate by. Believe that this defensiveness. So like, my partner and I, when we moved in together, were having a lot of conflict. And the thing I was having so much trouble with was I felt like he was defensive to everything that I was saying. And I'm like, can you just not be defensive and just hear what I'm saying? Right. But, in the way that I was saying it and the things I was picking up on, because I have a lot of I still have that really internalized like success and status. And as much as I'd like to think I've shed that, I haven't.
Right.
And I'm working on it. So there were all these things coming through that were actually attacking my partner, that he was defending himself from for his own good.
Yeah.
And in the world of, us folks privileged enough to argue on the internet with each other on our devices.
Right.
If it could be that, somebody saying this person shouldn't be at an event because it won't make women feel safe, and like, instead of the first action being like, how is that fair to that guy? It's just like, well, hang on, like, because I'm not saying that we should do something that's unfair to anybody, but I am talking about fairness too. We're on the same page here. We care about, everyone feeling safe and having a chance. So this is what I'm bringing up. And I think that most situations, and I've seen this in reading about restorative justice and participating in a process, that it takes a lot of energy from the community to come together and address harms. And they don't get addressed by rules or standards or laws, clearly.
Right.
But when everyone surrounds the people who've been harmed, the person or people who've caused harm, and holds that space, it's like an exorcism.
Yes.
Of so much. It's a healing process, but it's labor intensive.
It's like the body, like the blood cells, like moving to the wound to try and heal it, and it's going to take some time to recover. But there'll be scarring. It'll be jagged, but ultimately it'll be stronger. Actually, when it's repaired, just like when muscles break down and grow, they need to break down first and then heal, and they become stronger. Yeah. And interlocked. Yeah.
Wonderful metaphor. Yes. Yeah. And a harm caused to someone is a wound for the entire being. It's something that, the blood comes from another place. Like, the blood's doing something in one place, and then more blood has to come to treat the wound. But it's ultimately because nothing's going to be able to keep functioning if that wound stays open.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, really, and what we're talking about here is, like you have a community of like-minded individuals that are trying to create a space and share things to, make things better, right? In the most simplistic way of saying it. And, the voluntary associations that form in that group, and the dialogue that happens, that's open and free, and people able to communicate and express ideas and share feelings and experiences, is ultimately what does build this, right? And it forms sort of the value system of what we deem to be appropriate, what we like and what we don't like, and what we would want and not want. And I think that needs to be respected, right? I mean, if that's not respected, then that's a violation, I think, of the people's freedom in order to choose to participate in a particular version of what they would like to participate in, right? I mean, whether it's an event or a community gathering or a festival or something like that. And then this goes back to the notion of really sort of our tribal ancestors, and so you see this in other parts of the world as well, where it's the more community-based living that we see, the more the community comes together to support each other, whether someone's going through a crisis, or I remember reading about this in I think it was Joseph Campbell that was talking about schizophrenia in tribal societies, and how the society would all come together to help usher this person through this experience, like as a whole, as a unit, because they knew that it would benefit the whole. If one aspect is wrong, that means the whole is wrong, So, it's extremely. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I really think it's important to talk about. And you mentioned before, like, we get in these things, and it's like we're on our computers, and we're like, no, that's not the way it is. This is the way it is, and we have these ideas and these beliefs, and our narratives have been shaped by our experiences and by this sort of like reality bubble that we've created for ourselves. And when someone puts something in that bubble, it frightens us, and we have to jump on our thing because it's our thing, And and it's interesting that you brought this up, and I'd love to hear you like elaborate more on this. But you brought something up, I think, that's probably relevant and recent in the psychedelic community that I saw being addressed and being talked about. I don't know if you want to maybe talk more to that, or I would love to know, because I'm not as plugged in as you are in this sort of field, if you will, or I just maybe don't pay attention enough. So I'd love to learn more about some of the current issues that are happening, or concerns, or topics, if you will.
Yeah. Well, you're saying something funny to me a few minutes ago. You said, I'm talking about the way that you described the sort of like overarching cycle going on. And I was thinking, I'm talking about the Daniel Pinchbeck third wave event.
Yes.
But I not just that, because it's not a discrete event. But yeah, I think something, psychedelics this week. Here's something interesting that happened. There was an event planned by the third wave, and it was to happen in New York City. And it was a talk with Daniel Pinchbeck about safe psychedelic use, or like using psychedelics for, a safer, better world. And the third wave, they plan some really neat events and cool ideas. And I've listened to Paul's podcast before, and I appreciate his interviewing skills. And I don't want to tear him down, but I do want to call him in.
Sure. Yeah.
The community was calling him in and out for a while leading up to the event, because Daniel Pinchbeck did a post in 2017 saying how he had been abusive to women and had used substances as tools of seduction, and had caused harm. And in the post, he attributed some of his abusive actions to the ways he was treated by his mother and his aunt. So there's a lot going on here, because, apologies are apologies, but also if you're apologizing for hurting women and then blaming it on women that hurt you and just like stopping it at that, that's limiting to the whole thing. I don't take credence away from the harms that Daniel experienced. And like what was so hard about watching this movie, The Act of Killing, was that I was seeing these men who strangled thousands of people with wire, laughing about it. And I felt so moved for the things that had happened to them that they could do that. So in the case of the event, a lot of people said to the third wave, I don't feel safe attending, or, it's just not good to give this guy a platform talking about psychedelics when he's clearly abused that power, the power of his fame. And his Facebook post, you could just search Daniel Pinchbeck Me Too post and you'll find a copy. He said that when he was more in the limelight, he used that for, his own pleasure and gratification. Which is like, I hate when someone like comes out so vulnerably, or so it appears, and they get attacked back, because I don't want others to be to feel nervous about speaking their truth of ways they've harmed people. I've harmed people. I have not used my sexuality like for the good of other people throughout my life. There have definitely been instances where I know that. Now here I'm going to attribute it to rape culture, but like I have internalized rape culture and perpetuated harm. But anyway, the event ended up getting canceled after Brian Pace, who is very involved in the psychedelic community, made a public post saying, "I told Paul Austin to cancel this event and he hasn't. Therefore, I'm forced to come forward and say, this is not okay." And then the comment thread, which was like thick, like 200 some comments, and David Nichols archived all of them so you can read it. It was a community feud over what's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I looked at that, and I didn't feel good about when I was reading what Paul was saying. It didn't sit well with me. I mean, it's a difficult thing, but I think that, like we said before, if the majority of the community is coming forward and putting forth an issue here, and saying that we don't feel safe around this guy, particularly given the subject matter that he's been selected to talk about, I'm sure that there's probably other people that are more qualified to speak about those sorts of things that would make people feel comfortable, happy, safe, and have a fun experience doing that. So I support the vocalization of that, and at the end of the day, I guess it's up to Paul and Third Wave to make the decision that they want to make. But yeah, I just felt very off-put by the responses. I think I saw one that he said like, "Oh, go heal yourself" or something, and it's like, I think that we really, if we're going to be operating in this space and talking about the things that we're talking about and putting on the personas that we put on in order to lead the organizations that we lead, that we need to really take a minute, and it can be hard, it can be difficult, but to take a minute to have some compassion for, the other side of things. And that can be tough sometimes. And like you said before, like you think, people come into this community with their own stuff, and that stuff sometimes sticks in and it comes out. And it's like, okay, well, the good thing about it is that it is out. It's transparent a little bit, right? It's out there, so we can deal with it. Like we can address these issues and these important things. Yeah, and I just think that they canceled the event, right? Did they wind up canceling the event, or they canceled him there? Is that right?
Yeah, they canceled the event.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And as a public voice in any movement, there is responsibility to be informed about what you're talking about. So, Gabor Mate told someone to go heal themselves that was saying ayahuasca is a re-traumatization of indigenous people.
Okay,
that's what this woman, Lisana Red Bear, was saying.
Yeah,
which is it's like the colonizers came and took everything from the indigenous people, and now they're sick and they're coming for their medicine. I mean, that's like, I totally see what she was saying.
It's a valid point.
Mm-hmm, that point is valid, exactly, and maybe there's more that Paul could have looked into with the "go heal yourself" comment and all the other comments that he made. Like, Pinchbeck has a lot of important information to share. Like, I don't think anyone was messaging Paul and saying Daniel Pinchbeck doesn't have anything relevant to share. Like, the guy's written some incredible stuff. I believe that he's thinking on the right track, but some of his thinking is definitely on the right track. It's just the refusal to acknowledge the reality of the world that we live in, of how many people face violence related to sex and gender, and that, like, there are so many people qualified to talk about things, and not just the mostly white people that we're seeing talk about stuff in the psychedelic movement. I'm
sorry. I apologize for being a white man.
Remember what we said about privilege? It's not like that. It's really, what do you do? What are we doing with these, like, this extra access that we have to the resources that we use to do these things? And they're.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say real quick, it's a very interesting thing to say, like, to think in terms of like a category or an identity. Because at like my deepest core, I'm not like, what is a white man? Like, I don't understand what that is. Like when I'm in harmony with like my soul level of consciousness, and I feel, like I don't feel that way. I don't feel that but I know that this is what I'm encased in, and this is what my experience had, like the experiences I've had have been reflective of that, of me being in this costume or whatever, and but at like a deep level, it's like, and we all have the same life force inside of us, and it's like, if you can really kind of bring that to the surface with consciousness and awareness, that then you can understand, I think, a little bit more. And it definitely helps me to understand things from that level,
Yeah. No, I'm privileged. White privilege, for instance, is like something that no one would be aware of it that had it, because you think that it's the norm, that the way that you move through the world is what everyone else experiences, because it's just basic for you. And, if you were encased in the body of a queer, Black, trans, coal miner, like you would, you'd have a completely different, yeah, a whole different idea. And, there have been other